This is Tornado Talk, a podcast about one of nature's most fascinating phenomenon. Share your tornado story with us by email, Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com. That's Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com. Now, meteorologists Jennifer Naramore and Dan Holliday. Tornado Talk is on.
The history of the siren goes back to the late 19th century. The idea may have originated as far back as 1799 when Scottish physicist John Robison invented a music instrument. The interrupting airflow that used a stationary disc and a secondary rotating disc created a wailing siren sound effect.
Instead of using compressed air, the growing reach of electricity would power sirens. By the end of World War II, these sirens were used in Europe and the United States to warn residents of an attack so they would be prepared to take cover. Church bells were used prior to sirens, but not anymore. A more modern type of technology was now available.
It was 1950 when President Harry Truman signed the Civil Defense Act into legislation. Outdoor sirens appeared in more and more cities to be used to warn of a nuclear attack. As time went on, sirens were equally as important to alert the public of an approaching tornado.
But just like church bells were phased out as the original sound to warn the public of an invasion, the opinion of sirens has changed among some. With wireless technology, radio, television, and the internet, there are more ways than ever to find out about severe weather than a siren you might not hear when you're indoors.
The National Weather Service in Mount Holly, New Jersey has issued a tornado warning.
The tornado siren. Should they stay or should they go?
So you got to let me know. Should I stay or should I go?
This is Tornado Talk. Tornado sirens, with new ways to be warned. Should they stay or should they go?
The sound of a siren is synonymous with severe storms and tornadoes. For as long as most of us can remember, that eerie wailing means danger is on the way. But over time, it's possible that the tornado siren has been a crutch. In other words, if we can't hear it or it doesn't sound, how serious are we about taking cover when we need to?
ABC TV Birmingham meteorologist and founder of the podcast Weather Brains is James Spann. He believes that we're relying too much on old technology to determine our fate during a tornado.
I hate the things. I mean, just quite frankly, they're a problem in that it just seems like so much of the population of the United States still relies on them in a primary fashion for receiving a tornado warning. And the media seems to play it that way, and I think the people do, and we've got to move away from them. It's technology from World War I. This is 2016, and there are many, many, many more methods that are reliable, that will wake you up. And I think for me, what ended it was in 2012. You know, we had our big generational tornado outbreak here in 2011, April 27th. The next year, in January, on January 23rd, we had a precious 16-year-old girl that was killed. This is in a suburb northeast of Birmingham, and this was an EF3 tornado, and it came through at 4 a.m., pre-dawn hours. And the grieving parents said later that day that they never heard this siren. And it broke my heart. And I've just decided I'm not going to be nice about it anymore. And I decided to be very bold in that if you study Christina Heichelbeck's life and who she was and what she could be today and in the future, it's just heartbreaking. And here was a very intelligent family, and they thought that's it. So I just used that as an opportunity to move away from, being nice about it and to be bold about it. People cannot rely on a siren. You can't hear them inside a house. Oh, you might on a nice weather day if the sun's shining and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But during a raging storm at 4 o'clock in the morning when your family's asleep, it won't work. You can't hear a siren in most businesses, colleges, schools, churches, restaurants, stores, malls. You just can't. And that siren mentality has killed countless Americans. And it's going to kill countless Americans until we change it.
Logan Schultz lives in Mustang, Oklahoma. He was just 3 years old when the devastating F5 tornado took a direct hit on the Oklahoma City metro area on May 3rd, 1999. Logan says it may have been that event that intrigued him about severe weather and tornado sirens. Today, he is an administrator and moderator of the sirenboard.com. He strongly believes sirens are important.
Sirens are so overly important. It's ridiculous. They have so many functions. There are so many different types. I could go on and on and on and just overload you with information on the different types of sirens and everything like that. But they are very important. Most sirens today have, battery backup, remote activation. So a point I always make to people when they're like, "Oh, we don't need sirens. We've got our cell phones." Well, I've had an iPhone for quite some time, and sometimes you get emergency alerts and everything on your phone. But me, I've only got 2 emergency alerts since I've had my iPhone, so that's not really, a backup to having sirens. But what makes them so important is take a situation, like Moore. I remember chasing the Moore storm. I was there in 2013. I remember them sounding their sirens several times. And what's so important about it is if a community loses power, or you've lost your home and you've lost, your cell phone coverage and everything, and you have another disaster or a potentially deadly storm coming through, you still have your system of sirens that are going to go off. People are going to know, hey, that's the warning. We need to take cover. You should always have, several warning devices. And I will be the first to tell people, you do not need to rely on outdoor sirens unless you're outdoors. Their main purpose is to warn the people outdoors. I think oftentimes people forget about, the people who are working on our roads or stoplights or linemen and people like that, who actually work outdoors, who, aren't always on their phones, or they're using, large equipment and they wouldn't be able to feel or hear a cell phone go off. They're very important.
Recent studies from officials at the National Weather Service showed that residents in Tornado Alley felt there were too many false alarms. Rob Dale lives in Lansing, Michigan. He's been a meteorologist on TV and radio and felt it was time to put together a committee to help communities effectively use their sirens.
This started after the Joplin tornado. A lot of people complained about the siren sounding all the time. And it's something that had been on the back burner in a lot of meteorologists' minds for years, that there's no set policy on how sirens are activated. From my perspective on TV, it came to bother me because I would get jurisdictions sounding the sirens for reasons that we did not know. And so people would call in and say, why are the sirens in this area sounding? And we had literally no idea. And that didn't serve the public any well at all, because we are not able to go on air and say anything about those sirens other than it might be an accident. Well, maybe they saw something. Maybe they did see a tornado, but they didn't communicate it to us. So really, this was just something that just had been on my mind forever, and we'd always talked about it. I wish there was. Well, I finally decided I'm going to do it. So we researched everything that had been out there by FEMA. The last document they had written was in the 80s, and it certainly didn't refer to sounding them. It was the technicals behind it. So I put together a group, just kind of on my own at first, but put together a group of some meteorologists, some emergency managers, and some social science researchers. And what we did first is we just collected as many siren policies as we could across the country, most from internet searches. But if we had contacts in certain states, we touched base, and we just got everything we could. And from there, we kind of whittled away and say, okay, if we want to develop a national siren policy, what would it look like? So we came up with some specifics, and then we kind of realized that, hey, at the end of the day, these sirens are still the local community sirens. We cannot set a national policy because they're not ours to set a policy on. You can do certain things if you own it. Well, if we don't own it, we can't set a policy. So we kind of changed it to a best practices document. That's been refined with time. So as the chair of the IEM's Climate and Weather Caucus, what we did is we kind of gave it the official IEM seal of approval as much as we could to kind of give it some weight. We're working with the American Meteorological Society now to kind of get them to help along. So it cannot be a national policy. We're trying to work it through as hey, if you're looking for guidance on sirens, here it is. And here's why it is. We didn't just put out a one-pager. We explained all the reasons behind everything that we did.
On May 11th, 1970, a powerful tornado struck Lubbock, Texas. The twister killed 26, and according to the Lubbock Avalanche Journal, tornado sirens sounded just 3 minutes before the storm hit. Residents said by that time, the roar of the tornado drowned out the sound of the sirens. And since that time, Lubbock is the largest metropolitan community in Texas without tornado sirens. There are sirens on the campus of Texas Tech University, but not throughout the city.
Despite debate among residents and the Lubbock City Council, it takes significant funding to install tornado sirens citywide. Storm chaser Tyler Hudson lives there, and since advances in technology provide other ways for warning, would sirens even be needed in Lubbock now that residents have learned to live without them for more than 40 years?
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. I think the technology advances that we've made within the past few years, where we do get tornado warnings and any type of warning on our phones has helped out tremendously. But on the other hand, there's people like my grandparents who live in Amarillo, and that's more of a tornado hotspot than even Lubbock is, and they rely on sirens because they don't have smartphones. So I think it just kind of depends on the people you're talking about. If it's people over the age of 50, I would say a lot of them don't have access to the same wireless technologies that people like in my generation have. So I think it's a little bit harder. But on the other hand, I mean, like I said, it's a double-edged sword because sirens they weren't invented to be heard indoors. They were to be alerting the public outside to seek shelter inside. So it's always a little bit hard to hear the sirens inside. But I think they're both extremely important, and I think, especially with the case in Lubbock, even the weather alerts on the phones aren't that effective. I mean, half the time I don't even get the alerts. So, I don't know, it's kind of I think both are extremely important, and both should be given the funding and responsibilities that they both deserve.
ABC TV Birmingham meteorologist James Spann says money should be appropriated for the upkeep of sirens, but also for other ways of warning.
Maintain the sirens as best you can, but goodness, if you've got money from a federal grant or from whatever source, and if you want to really make the citizens safe in your municipality or county or whatever, get them a weather radio. And preferably have it programmed in advance, so when you come knock on the door and say, here's your weather radio, just plug it in. It's been programmed for the county in which you're located. There's a fresh battery in here. All you have to do is plug it in. We actually had a program in my part of the world where that happened. And it was a federal program about 12, 13 years ago. The Anniston RB Depot is in the eastern part of my state, and there was a chemical incineration program in which a lot of chemical weapons were being destroyed. And this was the warning mechanism that was going to be used if there was an accident and if some type of evacuation was going to be required. And so everybody within 6 counties surrounding that depot, every family received a free weather radio. And by golly, that was fantastic. But of course, that program ended years ago, and here we are today. So, but yes, in my opinion, if a municipality or some type of local government decides to spend some money on severe weather warnings, it should be getting weather radios properly programmed in the hands of people instead of, pumping money into sirens that serve a tiny fraction of the population.
Wireless alerts, if activated on smartphones, do send a message if a tornado warning is issued. That's likely where more and more young people find out about the threat of severe weather today.
Logan Schultz of the sirenboard.com says that despite sirens being old technology, anyone of any age knows what they are and what they mean in active tornado regions.
I believe if you've grown up in like Texas, Kansas, or Oklahoma, you know what the siren means. It's kind of like in the social media world we live in, and, you see tornado videos. 95% of the time, I would say you hear a siren roaring in the background. To use like a smartphone as an excuse, not so much. But I believe that, when you hear a siren, you can know for a fact that I'm in danger. I need to, seek media and figure out what's going on.
ABC TV Birmingham meteorologist James Spann says relying on more than one warning system is key for your safety.
I think we have to. And let me say this. I in my anger, I said some things I shouldn't have said a few years ago. I said at the time, in my opinion, somebody ought to climb these poles, take those things down, and burn them. And that's not right. They are part of the system. They do serve a purpose. They reach a limited number of people outdoors. And if one part of the system can reach a handful of people, then great. Let's leave them up. But we just can't tell people that this is your primary method of getting warnings. And what we have to do a better job of education. And what we tell people is that you need two methods of receiving tornado warnings, not one, but two, because there's no fail-safe method. And the baseline for the United States, obviously, it's weather radio. Is it perfect? No. Is the technology old? Yes. But is it reliable? Yes. The main problem with weather radio is still county-based, and we went to storm-based warnings, 8-9 years ago. But at some point, we'll get weather radio into the polygon system. But that's the primary baseline. Every American in a tornado-prone part of the country should have one in their home. I do. That's how my family gets the warnings. I don't have time to call them. And then the next tier, obviously, it's the phones. And a good smartphone app designed for warning, not the standard stock app that comes on a phone. Now, again, wireless emergency alerts, that seems to work. They serve tornado warnings and flash flood warnings and amber alerts. We don't know how that sausage is made, but again, that seems to work and be reliable. But there are some apps that are just good, and so that's what we're encouraging people to do, is have the two-tier system. One is having a weather radio at your home, and then having on your phone or your whatever device you carry with you a good app. And of course, the problem with that, there are people that can't afford a $30 weather radio. There are people that cannot afford a fancy smartphone, or if they have a phone, maybe a $9 app. And we have to also find ways of getting good warning systems into lower income families that just can't afford that.
Sirens have gotten their bad rap by not only being old technology, but being sounded too often when nothing happened. On Sunday, May 8th, 2016, the city of Aurora, Colorado, sounded their tornado sirens when a spotter believed they saw a funnel cloud, but no tornado warning was issued. Aurora's head of emergency management is Matt Chapman. He told KDVR-TV in Denver.
Predominantly, we rely on the National Weather Service to issue a tornado warning before we'll do that. It's always been our position that if a first responder, and we have police and fire, call in something threatening, we will trust our first responders and we'll set it off based on their report as well.
Meteorologist Rob Dale said better communication between emergency management as to why the sirens were sounding would have helped residents understand what was happening.
Absolutely, because those are the events then the public said, if the public tuned into the TV station, here's the thing, had they communicated and said, we see swirling clouds at that time, then okay, the Weather Service could have said, hey, there's a report of swirling clouds. They could have told the county, hey, we don't think it's a tornado, but it's still their siren, and if they want to sound it, they can. But that way, and then the TV meteorologist can go on air and say, hey, the sirens are sounding because they see some scary clouds. We don't see any confirmation of a tornado, but that way the communication is there. Right now, the people tuned onto their TV to expect to see something going on and heard nothing until the next day when the reports came out. They sound swirling clouds. So at the end of the day, those are still the community sirens. If they want to sound it for swirling clouds, they're more than happy to, but that communication needs to be there so that everyone knows. Sometimes these are sounded off accidentally. A lightning strike nearby can activate it. So the last thing you want to do is have people not knowing why. If you really think there's a threat, then that's fine. Sound them, but make sure everybody knows why they're being sounded. What we do is, the tornado siren, it's not a warning. It's an alert to tell people to get more information, to get into shelter, tune in for more information. When they're tuning in and they hear nothing, that they have no idea, and they're certainly not going to spend a half an hour in their basement if they're tuning into the TV and the TV station is still running their regular programming because they didn't know your community sounded those sirens.
ABC TV Birmingham meteorologist James Spann agrees.
If sirens are going to sound every time there's a dark cloud, if sirens are going to sound every time there's a severe thunderstorm, then when a siren sounds during a tornado warning, are people going to pay attention? In my opinion, no. I think social science backs that up after what happened here 5 years ago. Overwarning, people become desensitized, false alarms. It's just a noise. They hear a siren. It's just a noise. And there are some counties within my television market in which they sound those things for severe thunderstorm warnings. And again, remember, most people still can't hear them most of the time. But in places where people can hear them, the response you hear is those things go off all the time. I don't even think about it. It's just a thunderstorm, no big deal. So absolutely, I think there has to be some type of standardization with siren use across the country, if at all possible. And it seems like in this country, we just can't agree on anything. But we need to work on that. And the other problem we have is that sirens are a legacy system, and it's like weather radio. In most areas, they are still county-based. Now, there's some exceptions. There's newer siren technology, and you do have some counties in some cities in which the sirens sound based on the storm warnings, the polygon warnings. But in most cases, that's not true. So again, you've got sirens sounding where no people aren't even under a warning in a tornado situation. So it's just old, worn-out technology, and we have to move past that. And people love them. It seems like journalists love them. I watch a lot of local journalists, and that seems to be one of their favorite lines. Well, I can hear the sirens sounding, and maybe it adds drama to their live shot or something. But fine, if you're doing a live shot outside in the middle of a storm, you can hear it. But what about the 90% of the population that are inside a house or in a business or in a building that can't hear those things? I don't understand why they have such a popular position within modern culture. It's something that should have died really after the Cold War back in the 60s or 70s. And now with the digital technology, goodness, we have to move past that. But again, I do stress we've got to remember that there's a subset of the population that can't afford a weather radio. There's $30. There is poverty in a lot of my market, and there's poverty in everybody's market. And every life is precious, high income and low income.
On the website thevein.gawker.com, Dennis Mercereau authored a blog on March 20th, 2015 titled, quote, "Why do communities keep wasting money on useless tornado sirens?" Dennis stresses sirens are for outdoor use only, something all of our guests agree with. Dennis wrote, quote, "Saturating communities with these sirens arguably puts them in more danger than if you recycled them and used the scrap metal for lawn darts. Tornado sirens create a dangerous dependency on these fragile, unreliable devices," end quote.
Tyler Hudson worries in his hometown of Lubbock, Texas, that sirens are important and that although Lubbock has avoided a major tornado since 1970, he believes that is what it might take for the city to finally install them.
Unfortunately, in my opinion, and just the way that the city council acts around here, I just feel like in order to get the ball rolling, it's going to have to take another tornado to hit the city. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. People have gone to them before. People I know have gone to them before, pleading them to take another look at this case. And, I mean, they're just not taking it seriously. And, I mean, I get it because Lubbock hasn't had a tornado in a very long time. But we've had enough close calls within the past 30 years where I still think it's necessary. So unless another tornado comes into the city limits or near the city, I don't think it's going to be crossing their minds anytime soon.
Logan Schultz, who helps run the sirenboard.com, says the forum he is a part of is made up of passionate people who care about weather and still strongly believe in the need for sirens.
I would say that we have some of the highest educated, utmost professionalism from our members. They are smart. They genuinely care. What's great about the people on our forums is that they understand what these sirens are for. Our members are the best because they truly care what goes on with these sirens. They care about the safety of the people and the towns in which these sirens, warn people. They're so smart. I love being a part of this group. They are some of the coolest people I have ever been able to associate with, and I'm really happy with that.
Logan says not only do they value the use of sirens in actual emergencies, but they study and learn about each one of them, even testing them in remote areas.
My favorite, personally, is the Federal Signal 2001-130. I actually have one tattooed on my body, on my upper arm, with the tornado and stuff. If you want to see a picture of that, I'll send it to you. But that's probably my favorite siren. It's a newer one. The 2001 has been out since around 1989. It's, I think, one of Federal Signal's longest running electromechanical DC battery backup sirens that they have, and they're everywhere. They're a great siren. They're very reliable.
Meteorologist Rob Dale says he and his committee couldn't implement a national policy because local communities own their own sirens. The goal is to advise and assist communities in making sure they don't overuse sirens.
We have a community here in Michigan that sounds it every day at noon because they've always sounded it every day at noon. And granted, it's up north where they don't get a lot of tornadoes, but I guarantee if there's a tornado at 1 o'clock, people will just think that it's noon and they missed it by an hour. And that's one of the issues we had with Joplin is we don't recommend that you test more than once a week, or once a month, I'm sorry. So we recommend once a month as a test schedule. They were doing weekly tests. The newer equipment does not need to be tested that often. Researchers say the more you hear it, the more you're immune to it. So we would say even quarterly test if you really could, but that might be pushing it. So we recommend testing it as little as possible so that when they hear it go off, they really think it's the real thing. And that's really the goal of our side. So we try to trim it down. Some communities still sound the warnings or sound the sirens if there's a warning next to them. They may not be included, but they sound it just to be an abundance of caution is the phrase I always hear and I dislike. There's some, and I don't know what it is other than maybe people like pressing the button. But we want it to be, if you're pressing the button, it's because the big one is coming and not because it might be coming or you saw a scary cloud. We want it to be the real thing.
The committee has come up with guidelines they recommend on when to most effectively sound sirens.
We have basically 3 areas. So if there's a tornado warning by the National Weather Service, obviously that's the easy one. We recommend that it be activated every time a tornado warning is issued or reissued for your county. We also recommend if there's a tornado confirmed, if there's actually a trained spotter seeing a tornado on the ground, then sound the siren as often as your equipment allows. The older equipment, that would overheat kind of easily, but the newer stuff, you can almost sound it continuously. So we recommend if there's a tornado on the ground, keep pressing that button as often as you can. We recommend it if there's winds, indicated winds of 80 miles per hour or greater from straight line winds. Really, at the end of the day, if it's an 80 mile per hour tornado, it's no different than 80 mile per hour straight line winds. So if it's causing extreme destruction and it's a straight line wind, we say, hey, just sound the siren. The end result is the same. It's still a life safety threat. It makes no sense to sound a siren for a 50 mile per hour tornado, but not sound it for a 100 mile per hour straight line winds. So 80 was our cutoff. That's really where structural damage starts to begin. And then if there is no warning, if there is a trained weather spotter with a reliable background that says there is a tornado on the ground, then go ahead and sound the sirens, but at the same time notify the Weather Service and notify local media, because if they don't know the sirens are going off, it doesn't do any good. We recommend that NWS Chat, the chat program that a lot of emergency managers use and broadcast meteorologists, that we communicate it that way. So say, hey, our spotter saw a tornado here. This is why we're sounding the sirens. That way everyone is able to stay on the same page because communications is the most important thing, and we usually find that area to be the most lacking.
Logan Schultz of the sirenboard.com says the siren is something sounded by a government official, and with today's rise in social media messaging, warnings can come from untrusted sources.
I'm not going to mention any names. I'm not going to say anything about anyone that I followed on Facebook, but there's been a lot of times where I've been like, you should not have posted that. You should not have said that. We live in everyone is so hypersensitive to things, and you see something posted on a weather person's Facebook, and then it gets shared, and their information's wrong, or they're calling for a tornado outbreak, and it's just, it gets ridiculous. When a siren goes off, that there's a warning or there's some sort of emergency and you need to find information on it.
No one's ever going to take them out. Let's back up. If you've had a community where they've been around for 50 years, they're going to stay around for a long time, just because it's the way it's always been, and I don't expect any communities to just up and stop and not use sirens anymore. They still have value, especially in areas where you've got outdoor venues or you've got parks, and we would hope that people would have already gone to shelter because there's a storm coming, but that doesn't always happen. So in areas where that's still effective, we're still, personally, I'm still on board with keeping sirens going. But to really expand your network, to make that the primary tool, I don't think that works these days. So the siren by itself, again, and I want to reiterate this, siren by itself is not a warning. It is an alert, and that's people tune in for more information. They need to know that. So if you're an emergency manager, you may think everyone knows what the siren means. They probably don't. So it needs to be something you publicize, you push out with social media during severe weather week. It is not a tool that can be used simply by itself.
Next on Tornado Talk, August 6th, 1993. 23 confirmed tornadoes tear through parts of the Mid-Atlantic and Virginia. 4 fatalities, more than 250 hurt. A look back at violent weather in Virginia on Tornado Talk.
This has been Tornado Talk. Take a moment to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search for Tornado Talk. Tornado Talk is free to you, but not free to produce. If you love what you hear, please support the show by becoming a member of Team Tornado Talk. It helps keep us going. Your monthly membership starting at $5 a month can earn you cool rewards like a Tornado Talk t-shirt, cap, koozies, and more. Plus, you'll always find free access to our past episodes. Just click the Patreon button online at tornadotalk.com.